Hello there, boys and girls. Thank you for joining me for this fun and exciting language arts lesson. Now, this lesson is a grade 3 lesson and will be about retelling stories while paying special attention to specific story elements or story details. Now, before we begin, there are a number of things that you will need for this lesson. They are pencil, a writing book, and a storybook. Any one storybook that you have at home can be used. Now, let us see what we will be learning for this lesson. Now, boys and girls, as mentioned, this is a grade 3 lesson. Our objective is that we will be learning how to retell a story, giving details about specific story elements. So that means that by the end of the lesson, you should be able to say, I can explain different parts of a story. I can ask myself questions to identify the different parts of a story. And finally, I can retell a story with all the parts after reading or listening to a story. Now, as you know, boys and girls, a story has several parts. And the first part that we need to know is the title. Yes, the title. In other words, the title is the name of the story. One title that you may have heard before is The Three Little Pigs. You may have also heard about Anansi and the Cow. You may have even heard Naughty Eddie LaRue. Now, these are all lovely stories, but they are the names of the stories. Now, these stories also have characters. As you can see, the character is the person or animals who are in the story. These are the persons or animals who do the actions in the story. Now, some examples of characters that I can think of are the wolf and the three little pigs. I can think of Anansi and Brother Cow. I can also think of Eddie LaRue. Yes, that naughty little boy. Now, can you think of any other character that you may have read or heard in a story? Be sure to write them down. Now, a story, boys and girls, also take place in a setting. Yes, a story doesn't just happen in a vacuum, but it takes place in a setting. When we say setting, we're talking about the time and the place when the story happens. Yes. For example, the story could have taken place in the woods. It could have taken place on a farm, or it could have taken place in your backyard. Yes. So those refer to the place. But it also refers to the time as mentioned before. It could have taken place yesterday, this morning, in the afternoon, or even in the future. Did you know that stories can be set in the future? Yes, they can. Can you think of a setting that you would have heard in a story? Good job. Now I want us to also remember that a story also have what we call a plot. What do you think the plot is? That is right. The plot refers to the body of the story or the actions that take place in the story. A story must have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Now, the beginning, middle, and end all come together to make up the story or the plot. Now, the plot also has several other areas, and we'll learn about them as we go along. But for now, these are the main parts of the story that we'll be focusing on. Okay, so let's go. Now, we are about to read a story, but before you can read the story, I want you to ask yourself some questions that can help you to identify the parts. of a story. The first question that you will want to ask yourself is, what is the title or name of this story? Who are the characters, people, or animals in the story? Where and when did this story take place? And what happened in the story? You may also want to pay special attention to what happened at the beginning of the story, in the middle of the story, and at the end. Now, are you ready for the story, boys and girls? I'm sure you are. So let's go. The title or the name of this story is The Hidden Treasure. The Hidden Treasure. Many years ago, a very poor peasant bought a plot of land. One day, while he was plowing it, he came upon an iron box that was buried in the soil. When he opened it, he was astonished to discover that it was filled with valuable gemstones and coins made of silver and gold. Since he owned the land where it was found, he could have kept the treasure for himself. But the peasant was a truly honest man. He at once went to the person from whom he had bought the land and showed him the treasure. "What is this?" asked the previous owner of the plot. The peasant told him the story of how the treasure was found. But the previous owner refused to accept it, saying, "The treasure would have been mine if I had found it. I think it must have been hidden in the plot by my ancestors. As you have found it, it belongs to you." Now, boys and girls, we have listened to that story. Did you enjoy the story? I know you did. I enjoyed it too. So we're going to go back to our questions to see if we can identify the parts of the story. Now let's go. Do you remember our questions? In case you have forgotten, here they are again. What is the title or name of the story? Who are the characters, the people or animals in the story? Where and when did this story take place? And what happened in the story, referring to the beginning, middle, and end? Now let us go back to the story, boys and girls. What is the name of the story? Can you identify the name of the story? Yes, the name or title of the story is The Hidden Treasure. Give yourselves a round of applause. Good job. Now, the second question is, who are the characters in the story? Now, can you identify the characters in the story? Remember, boys and girls, that the character can be a human being, a person, or even animals. Yes. But in this story, who are the characters? Good job. There are two characters in the story. The first character that we saw or heard of in the story is the poor peasant. Yes. And the second character that we saw is the previous owner, meaning the person who owned the land before the peasant owned it. So there are two characters in the story. So far, we can identify the title or name of the story, and we can identify the characters in the story. Now, boys and girls, can you tell me what happened in the story? Remember that we must pay attention to what happened in the beginning, in the middle, and at the end of the story. So let's go. Let us see if we can identify what happened or tell what happened in the story. Now, the first thing that we saw happening in the story was that the peasant was plowing his land. No, we assume that he was plowing it probably because he was going to farm, he was going to plant some crops. Then we noticed that he found an iron box, but it wasn't just any regular iron box. It had valuable treasure, and he was very astonished. In other words, he was surprised when he found the iron box with the treasure. Now, what did the peasant do after that? Let us see if we can find what he did in the story. That's right, he went back to the previous owner. That is the person who owned the land before him, and he showed him the treasure. Now, when the man saw the treasure, what did he say? What did he do? That's right, he refused to take the treasure from the peasant. He said to him that since you have found it, it belongs to you. Now, can you tell me, boys and girls, would you have done the same thing if you were to find treasure in your backyard? Would you share it with your parents or your brothers or sisters, or even the person who may have owned the place where you live before you? Hmm, that is something to think about, don't it? All right, so let us continue with the lesson. Now, boys and girls, remember we are looking at the story elements. And as mentioned, every story has certain elements. And the first part of the story that we learned about was the title or the name of the story. Now, here I have a graphic organizer or a diagram which can help us to understand and to easily see the different parts of the story. This is something that you can do at home on a sheet of paper with your pencil, and you can ask mommy or daddy or your older brother or sister to help you. So in the middle of the diagram, you see that we have the name of the story. And the name of the story is The Hidden Treasure. So we put that in the middle of our diagram. Now we also see that we have the characters listed. We can see the characters listed in the green box in the diagram. And who were the characters again? Of course, the characters were the poor peasant and the previous landowner. Then we move on to the setting. Can you remind me of what the setting is, boys and girls? Did you say the time and the place where the story happened? If you did, then give yourselves a round of applause. Good job. Now, the setting of this story is actually many years ago. Yes, in terms of the time, it happened long ago. And the story also said one day on the plot of land. So we know that it did not happen in a house. The story didn't take place on the beach, nor did it take place on the playfield at school. It happened on a plot of land. Very good. But what about the plot? Can you remind me of the plot of the story? Remember, the plot of the story has special parts, but we're looking at the beginning, the middle, and the end. So in the beginning, we saw that the peasant or the poor man, he was plowing the land, and he came upon an iron box with gemstones and treasure. Then he took it to the previous owner of the land. But the previous owner said, hmm, I can't accept it. But since you found it, the treasure would belong to you. But instead, the owner refused to accept it. Now, boys and girls, based on this diagram, let us see if we can retell the story or put our retelling of the story in a few sentences. Now, here I have on the screen my sentence or sentences as to how I would retell this story while mentioning all the important details such as the character, the setting, the title, and the plot, making sure to pay attention to the beginning, middle, and end of the story. Let's read together. In the story called The Hidden Treasure, many years ago, a poor peasant bought a piece of land, and one day while he was working the plot of land or working on the land, he found a box with treasure. He took the He took it to the previous owner of the land, but the previous owner refused to accept the treasure. So they could probably have decided to share it. Is this what happened in the story, boys and girls? Hmm. We know that the previous owner refused to accept it. So then the poor peasant got the treasure. All right. Now, here's what I want you to do for me. If you have this book at home, Wendy's Wonderful Week, yes, this lovely literacy 123 book by the Ministry of Education, I want you to read this story. But if you don't have the storybook at home, you can use any other storybook that you have. And be sure to pay attention to the important story parts or the story elements. Now, I went ahead and read the story, and I wanted to share another diagram with you which breaks down the parts of this story. So let's go. The characters in this story are Wendy, the old lady, and Miss Burns. Now, Wendy is the main character. She's who the story is all about. But there's also an old lady who is in the story. And there is another lady by the name of Miss Burns. Now, Miss Burns is Wendy's dance teacher. Now, we see that the story took place over the period of 1 week. Yes, that refers to the time or when the story happened. And as it relates to the place, the story happened in several places. Yes, boys and girls, a story doesn't always have to happen in one place or one location. It can happen in several places. So, the story took place at school, at home, during karate class, during dance class, and on the football field. Good. So now we're going to see what actually happened in the story. In other words, we're going to talk about the plot of the story. We are paying special attention to the beginning, middle, and end. So here goes. The first thing that happened in the story was that Wendy goes to school. Yes, and she also helps the old lady on a Monday. So on a Monday, Wendy goes to school and she helps the old lady who lives next door. She also takes care of her parrots and play with her dog. Now that happens on a Tuesday, but on Wednesday we see that Wendy goes to dance class. Do you go to dance class? Can you dance? If you can, let me see your best move. That's right. You are a very good dancer. But is the story over yet? Hmm, no. Something else happened in the story. What happened in the story? Based on the diagram, we see that Wendy also goes to karate class on a Thursday. Is that all? Where else does Wendy go during the week? She goes to football on a Friday. Good job. And finally, on a Saturday, we see that Wendy watches television. Do you like to watch television, boys and girls? I like to watch television. What is your favorite TV show? That is mine too. All right, so let us continue with our lesson. Now, boys and girls, remember that if you do not have the book Wendy's Wonderful Week, you can use any other storybook that you have at home. You can also visit www.bookfusion.com and have your parent or older brother and sister sign into the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information's library. There you can find the story, Wendy's Wonderful Week, and many other literacy 1, 2, 3 stories, and many other stories that I'm sure you will enjoy reading. Now, boys and girls, let us see what we have learned. We are almost at the end of this lesson. So let us see how much we have learned. Remember our I can statements? Can you honestly say yes to these statements? I can explain the different parts of a story. I can ask myself questions to identify the different parts of a story. I can use pictures or diagrams to record details from a story. I can retell a story with all the parts after reading or listening to the story. If you can say yes to all of those I can statements, then give yourselves a round of applause. Good job. Well, boys and girls, that's all the time that we have for this week's language arts lesson, where we will be learning something new. Now remember to practice, and practice to retell stories after you have read.